Good morning. It is a great pleasure to be with you today to share some stories about one of my great passions, and that is serving others. I'll start by saying, Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." And that is what we do every Sunday at the Trinity Outreach Center. By serving the poor and hungry, we serve Christ and nourish members of our community through that ministry, the Sunday dinner. One of my tasks, as you've heard, is to tell some stories about that ministry, the impact that it has on the lives of those that we serve, as well as on our lives, those who do the serving. So before I tell you about the Sunday dinner, I want to tell you a story about a man named Johnny. Johnny is an Army vet. He served in the Army for about 20 years, I think he said. He's one of the first people who attended the Sunday dinner when we opened in October 2007. At that time, the dinner was held in the church's fellowship hall, or what we call the Fortune Room. But later we moved the dinner to newly created, newly renovated building that we now call the Trinity Outreach Center. Johnny came there too, and we were glad to see him. However, he was a pretty withdrawn kind of guy. Most that he ever said was hi and thank you. He said hi when he came into the dining room and thank you when he went through the serving line to receive his meal. However, when he spoke, his voice was rather muffled, but there was always a slight smile. Johnny was the kind of guy who would take his place wherever he found an empty seat and enjoy his meal, but oftentimes it was in isolation. The mission of the Sunday dinner is to nourish the spirit and bodies of those among us who are hungry, thereby creating a more viable community through generosity, hospitality, and fellowship. In helping to create that kind of environment, the volunteers and I made it a point that every Sunday, as we greeted every guest, that we welcomed them with a warm smile and a hello, and oftentimes, as relationships were established, there was a hug or a handshake. We wanted them to know that we were glad that they were with us, and we wanted them to know that this was an environment that was welcoming and healthy. We always felt that it was important that our guests knew that they were invited and welcomed to that space. Johnny was there. At first, Johnny really didn't want to talk to anyone, but slowly, and maybe because of my persistence, he began to let me into his world. Slowly, we developed a friendship. I learned he served in Vietnam and was stationed in Da Nang. He didn't work. He was homeless. He often slept at the men's shelter. He suffered from PTSD. He had very little support from his family and very few friends. He said he liked coming to the Sunday dinner because the church people, that's what he called us, were friendly and nice. The food was always hot and good. The coffee was some of the best that he was able to find. And then he said something that was quite striking to me. He said, you all don't hassle people about using the restroom. He said, you'd be surprised at how embarrassing it is at times to go into a place and all you want to do is use the restroom. He said, but you don't hassle us about that. It's always clean, it's always well stocked, and you leave people alone. Who knew that something like that would make such a big difference? He said, I go in there almost every Sunday and I wash up. I have my stuff with me, and he pointed to a book bag or a backpack down on the floor near his feet, and he said, I've got my stuff in there. My soap, my toothpaste, my towel. He said, and I'm able to clean myself up. He said, thank you. And then he said something else. He said, thank you also for the Christmas gift that you provided last year. He said, it made such a big difference. The things that you gave out may not seem like much to people, but these aren't things that we can get at a food pantry or any other kind of pantry. He said, you gave us toothpaste and toothbrush, soap, a washcloth. He said, you gave us, the men, a disposable razor with shaving cream. He also said, you gave us a thick pair of winter socks and gloves. He said, you don't know how much that helped. That was a pretty long conversation for Johnny. So after a few more words, that ended, and we just sat and enjoyed the meal together. In another conversation, Johnny told me that he uses the services at the VA every now and then. He said, they're helping me with my condition. But he chimed in and said, but I have to admit, I really don't like taking the meds. They make me feel kind of funny. I told him, I said, well, if you go back and tell your doctor or your caseworker how the meds make you feel, they can adjust them until they find the right combination. And he said, no, I don't think I'm gonna do that. They just make me feel too tired, sleepy. I'm not myself. So I don't think I'll do that. I didn't try to push the issue any further. I figured I'd address it again later. I observed Johnny as being a pretty mild-mannered, soft-spoken guy. However, one Sunday, I did get to see a temper that I hadn't experienced or seen before. I learned that there was a younger man sitting in the back at the dining room at the same table where Johnny was. And for some reason, he targeted Johnny for his cruel comments and his disrespectful manner. He kept referring to Johnny as, hey, old man, and made some other annoying comments. From what I was told, Johnny tried to ignore him for a while, but the guy just kept on. And eventually it got on Johnny's nerves. The next thing I knew, I heard ruckus in the back of the dining room, way in the back. Chairs were being shoved out of the way, and about this time, one of our guests was running up to me saying, Karen, you better come, it's Johnny. Some young kid has been teasing him, and he's about to lay him out. By the time I got to the dining room, some dinner guests had separated Johnny from the young man, but Johnny had already moved the tables out of the way and was just inches from grabbing this young kid. I called out his name, and he paused, but the fury in his eyes and the anger on his face told a whole different story. That young man really had no idea what he was getting into. The dinner staff escorted the young man out, and they told him, "Now you're welcome to come back, but you have to wait at least a couple of weeks. You're welcome to come back, but you must respect other people. Leave your nasty behavior outside. That won't be tolerated in here." Johnny said to me, "I don't know why that guy started messing with me. I never said anything to him, never said a word." Sometime after that experience, Johnny started volunteering at the dinner. He started helping to clear the tables. He would sweep the floor. He would do whatever he saw that was necessary. And he did it in cooperation with our volunteers and staff. I think Johnny realized that the Sunday dinner wasn't just a place to come and get a hot meal. It was a place where community is formed, friendships are established. He realized that we cared for him and about him, and he cared for us. But about 2 years ago, Johnny stopped coming. We don't know what happened to him. Some of the guys that he would sit and eat lunch with and tell stories with, they had been looking for him and they couldn't find him either. We miss Johnny. We're grateful for the time that we had with him. I know the Sunday dinner and the people there made a difference in his life, and he made a difference in ours. My hope is that Johnny is okay. We miss him. We look for him. And who knows, maybe one day he will reappear. The Sunday dinner is a place where people from all walks of life are invited, who come and eat. Some stay for months, coming every Sunday. Others we only see for a short while. But that's what the Sunday dinner is for. Another story is about a lady named Elisa. Elisa started coming to the dinner about 7 years ago. She was trying to make ends meet by coming to the dinner and not using money for a Sunday meal because she had recently lost her job. She had been employed as a secretary receptionist, but because the company downsized, she lost her position. She had been looking for another job, but was having a really hard time because her car broke down. It needed some major repairs. And many of the jobs that she was interested in, where she knew her skills would match, they were way outside her normal area of travel. And because her car was down, she would have to rely on the bus. And I have to say, regrettably, the transit system here in Indianapolis is not very good at all. You can get to some places where some really good jobs are. You can get there on the bus. But because the system stops running at a pretty early time, you might find yourself stranded in some areas and not able to get back home. That's a pretty scary thing to experience late at night, not knowing how you're going to get back home. I am pleased to say, however, that a much improved transit system is underway. And I know that it will address a number of the problems that many people who rely on that system will be grateful for. Back to Elisa. As I worked with her to help her find other employment, we also paid a month of her rent. Her family and friends were able to chip in to pay the balance due. And as a kind of bartering system, she began to work with us in the Sunday dinner for a few weeks. She finally found another job. It was on the bus line. It offered great benefits. Her pay was a little better than her former position. We're grateful for what we were able to do to help Elisa. Every now and then she comes back to the Sunday dinner to give us an update, and I'm pleased to say she's still employed, still at the same place, has had a couple of salary raises. She's delighted, she looks good, and she is much, much grateful for the work that we were able to do together. I share these stories, and there are so many more like them, because the Sunday dinner is not your typical feeding ministry. Yes, striving to eliminate hunger in the community is at the very core of what we do. It's at the very top of our vision. But it's also about taking care of the whole person. That is so very important. Some of the people who have come to the Sunday dinner have also come to worship. Some of them have stayed. Some of them have just passed through. But it is a part of what we do at the Sunday dinner, taking care of the whole person and inviting them to worship with us. We pray with them. We invite them to pray with us and for us. It's a two-way relationship. When I accepted the call to Trinity back in 2002, my title was Associate Rector for Mission and Outreach. I was called to Trinity to help the church develop an outreach ministry because there wasn't one. The leadership and members at that time surely were very interested in doing good things in the community to address a number of the needs. But at that time, their largest work in the community was through what was called the Benefactions Committee. That was the grants ministry. At that time, the church's grants ministry offered grants twice a year. They functioned with a budget of over $250,000, and they let grants nationally and internationally. But through a long period of discernment, the membership decided what they really wanted to do was more of a hands-on ministry and not just write checks. And so I was called to help build their outreach ministry. Since that time, our outreach ministry has grown enormously, consisting of seasonal programs to help families, to help children with school supplies and school uniforms, Christmas help. We serve dinner every 6 weeks at the family shelter here in the city. We work with Gleaner's Food Bank, which is our food bank here that serves the state. We're also working with families who are relocating from some country, making their home here in the United States and settling in Indianapolis. That's called our Refugee Welcoming Program. We just finished working with one family with 6 members, helping them with their English, helping them become established in a home and in employment. It's a tremendous work, and we have just started working with another family. A new ministry that's being developed with hopes of getting funding will provide housing for our LGBTQT youth. I think I have that in the right order. We are renovating a house, and it will be a residential home for a number of teenagers. That is the population that is impacted so devastatingly. Families give up on them. Young people become homeless with nowhere to go. I've got a sign here that I've got 5 more minutes, so I'm going to rush through this. The Sunday dinner is a 1-hour ministry that's offered every Sunday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. We just held our 10th anniversary last October. We have between 90 to 100 volunteers from just Trinity Church who work with that ministry. We've had the pleasure of hiring people from the community to work with that particular community. There are so many reasons why that ministry is so important, but I will tell you that there is a key thing that encouraged us, that inspired us to start that ministry. I'll tell a story. There's an ancient rabbinical story that tells how God calls the angels together every morning. When they're finally all together, the Creator asks, "Where does my world need mending today?" After the angels answer, God sends them out and says, "Go and mend it." That's one of the reasons we started the Sunday dinner, because we know that there are a number of people in our community who go hungry every day. We know that there are children who go hungry every day. I heard a statistic just last week that over 200,000 people in Indiana go hungry every day. We have the resources to address hunger, and so Trinity decided this was one of the ministries that we would undertake. We did not develop this ministry in isolation. We spent months talking to our neighbors, talking to other organizations that provide a soup kitchen, those who have food pantries, those who are served by those organizations, and we asked them, what is the need? And over again, that's what we heard. There are too many people that are going hungry. When the Eucharist is the most important part of what we do on Sunday, it was heartbreaking to us, those on our committee, who learned that every day of the week, if you were hungry in our neighborhood, which is called the Mapleton Fall Creek neighborhood, if you were hungry, there were 2 places where you could go on alternating days to get something to eat. 6 days were covered, but not Sunday. And that's how we came up with the name, the Sunday Dinner. We partner with organizations that help us to provide the meal, but we're so committed to this ministry that we have a pantry that's set up just for it. Our partner, Second Helpings, which is a food ministry, provides the entree. We make sure that it's a full meal, and we provide vegetables, a fresh salad, fresh fruit, and et cetera to go with that meal. We're grateful to have the opportunity to serve our community in that way. I will say this, when you think about the themes that run through the Bible, Jesus is always talking about and demonstrating his love for the poor, the disenfranchised. And so that gives us that calling and a direction as to where our ministries should focus: on the abused, the poor, the oppressed, the downtrodden. You fill in the blanks. That ministry serves people who are underemployed, employed, unemployed, some who have never worked before and never will. But all are welcomed, and we're grateful that we have the resources to address that kind of need, as well as so many others. Thank you so much for your time. I want to make sure I'm not running overtime. So thank you. And pray for us as we continue to seek ways to address the needs in the community. not only do we know that we're blessing other people, but because they cross our path, they are blessing us as well. Amen.
Amen.